You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and obviously I have to start with the Houston Texans. Before I get into Deshaun Watson making his trade request official, I want to talk about the guy who's never going to get the chance to coach him with the Texans. And that is David Culley. The hire of Culley is the perfect epitome of why Deshaun Watson wants out of Houston. All due respect to Culley, he's been in football for a really long time, since 1978. And he's been in the NFL since 1994. Alright, the guy has a ton of experience. He's 65 years old. He comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. But this is an absolutely disastrous hire. Here's a guy who I don't think has ever interviewed for a head coaching job before the Texans job. Here's a guy who was wide receivers coach for the Chiefs in 2014. You know what Chiefs wide receivers did in 2014? They didn't catch a single touchdown pass. I'm not kidding. All the touchdowns that Alex Smith threw that year were to running backs and tight ends. That's a terrible look for the wide receivers coach. Here's a guy who was quarterbacks coach for Josh Allen's rookie year, when Allen really looked bad. Had a losing record, completed under 53% of his passes, threw for just over 2,000 yards, threw more interceptions than touchdowns. The only time he's ever done that. It's one thing to have a ton of experience like Culley does, but it's bad experience. I'm just trying to figure out what he said in the interview that would convince the Texans to hire him. When I saw that it was between Culley and Leslie Frazier, I thought, okay, great. The Texans are going with a black man to be their next head coach. That's a good job by them. We need more black men to be head coaches. But I really thought the job was going to go to Leslie Frazier. a guy who's done a really good job coaching the Bills' defense. Wasn't a great head coach with the Vikings, but you know what? We've seen retreads succeed before. Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll. Andy Reid, too. I really thought Frazier was going to get the job. The fact that it went to David Culley? What did he put on his resume? Okay, congratulations. He was passing game coordinator for the Ravens the past couple seasons. Lamar Jackson still isn't good with his arm. He was with Andy Reid for a long time. Fantastic. There's a reason you've never gotten a head coaching interview before. There are some guys in the NFL who are just career assistants. Guys like Dante Scarnecchia, Dave DeGuglielmo, Ron Middleton, Edgar Bennett. These guys have been in the NFL for decades. They never get considered for a head coaching job. And that's okay. Not everyone's cut out to be a head coach. I mean, I have no faith in Culley's ability to be a good leader of men. If he's going to call plays, I have no faith in his ability to do that. He's never called plays in the NFL. The only time this guy was ever in a position to call plays was in 1989 and 1990 when he was the offensive coordinator for the UTEP Miners. And I'll be honest with you, I have no idea if he called plays or if he didn't. I know that David Lee was their head coach. Wasn't a good head coach. Actually spent a lot of time in the NFL as a quarterbacks coach. So I have no idea who called plays for the 89 and 90 UTEP Miners. You know what? It doesn't matter because those teams went 2-10 and 3-8 respectively. I mean, if you're Cal McNair, it's okay if you want to bring in Nick Caserio to lead the team. Very smart guy. You've wanted him for a long time. I'm not begrudging you for that. You want to keep Jack Easterby around. If you think highly of him and Caserio thinks highly of him, it really doesn't matter what the outside world says. But at the end of the day, you're in a tenuous position. Bill O'Brien left you in a terrible position. He left the cupboard bare of draft picks, gave away DeAndre Hopkins. O'Brien's fired 4 games into a dismal 4-12 season. And you have a quarterback in Deshaun Watson who's gotten used to winning. He sees this guy making bad moves. The Tunsil trade was a terrible move. The Hopkins trade was a terrible move. Do I think O'Brien's a good coach? The answer is yes. But as far as actually making front office-like decisions, The guy's absolutely dreadful. Watson wants to win. He sees the writing on the wall. It's going to be some tough sledding in Houston for a few years. If you're the owner, you need to keep him happy. If he wants Eric Bieniemy, hire Eric Bieniemy. If he wants Robert Saleh, hire Robert Saleh. These aren't exotic names. It's not like he wants his high school offensive coordinator. No, he wants two extremely respected guys in league circles to be the next head coach because he thinks that gives him the best chance of winning in Houston. Instead, you shut him out of all discussions. And you end up hiring David Culley. I understand why Deshaun Watson wants out. Now I'll get to Watson making his trade request official. Obviously, there were rumors of him being unhappy for weeks. You had reports saying that Cal McNair said that Watson was going to be consulted on the GM search and the head coaching search. You don't need to listen to him 100%. If he says, I want you to hire him, and him, you don't need to do that, but you do need to make Watson feel like he's part of the conversation. Just a month ago, this guy was the future of the Houston Texans. This guy is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. In 18 and 19, he made the playoffs. Last year, he led the NFL in passing yards, yards per attempt, and yards per completion. He has made 3 straight Pro Bowls. He signed a big contract with the Texans not that long ago. You should keep him in the loop. Make him feel like he's being listened to. If you're Cal McNair and you have your heart set on Nick Caserio, and you really want to keep Jack Easterby, I understand that, but you really need to listen to your franchise quarterback. You need to listen to a guy like Watson. A guy who's proven himself in the NFL. This isn't a Jamal Adams situation where this guy plays an unimportant position. He's making ridiculous contract demands. And he's a headache for everyone involved. No. Deshaun Watson plays quarterback, the most important position in sports, signed a 4-year, $156 million contract extension with the Texans on September 5th, and just wants a seat at the table. All he wants is to be listened to. It would upset anyone if he offered reasonable suggestions and he wasn't listened to. I don't begrudge Deshaun Watson for a second for being upset with the Texans. Again, if you're Cal McNair and you have your heart set on Nick Caserio, that's okay. But part of being a boss, part of running a sports team or any company, is how to manage people. If a great asset to you makes some suggestions that you don't feel are good suggestions, you've got to be able to put him down gently, or else you're going to have a mutiny on your hands. And that's what happened here. Deshaun Watson didn't feel that he was listened to. He sees the writing on the wall that the Texans are going to be in for some tough sledding. They made a terrible hire in David Culley to be their next head coach. I understand that there were reports that came out that said that Watson wanted to be traded regardless of who was named the next head coach of the Texans. I'll be honest with you, I don't believe those reports. If the Texans had hired Bieniemy, do you really think Watson would say, you know what, I don't want to play for Eric Bieniemy. I changed my mind. I don't want to play for this guy who I've advocated for a while. I want to be traded. I don't think it's a coincidence that this public trade request from Watson came out the morning after Culley was hired. I do think Watson was holding out hope that the Texans would get this hire right, and they hired the worst possible man for the job in David Culley. The Texans interviewed some guys who I don't think should have gotten interviews. Joe Brady, I think it's ridiculous that he got a lot of interviews in this head coaching cycle. At the end of the day, he didn't get a job, so I can't get too upset. Josh McCown, going straight from a quarterback to a head coach, that's absolutely ridiculous. But I'll say this, I would have liked Brady or McCown being the Texans' next head coach over David freaking Culley. This 65-year-old career assistant is now going to be the head coach of a team that's going to undergo a huge rebuild. There is no way on this earth that ends well. But now on to where Deshaun Watson's going to go next. I think it's pretty clear that he's going to be traded. This is a headache that if you're the Texans, you can't carry into the season. I know it's a different sport, but they play in the same city. Bleacher Report alluded to this in Gridiron Heights. There are a lot of similarities between James Harden forcing his way out of Houston and Deshaun Watson trying to do the same. The Rockets tried to make it work. They traded for John Wall. They kept Harden around to start off the season. Harden was out of shape, wasn't playing as well, blasted his teammates. It got to the point where the Rockets sent him home. Then a few hours later, he was traded to the Nets. If you're the Texans, you see this situation unfolding right next door. If you're Nick Caserio, you've got to say to yourself, the James Harden situation was untenable for the Rockets. This is very similar in the sense that a Houston superstar wants out. Let me rip the Band-Aid off now so there's not that cloud hovering over the team as they play games next season. There have been 2 teams that have been primarily linked to a Deshaun Watson trade. The Dolphins and my beloved Jets. And the Jets are viewed by Watson as the preferred destination. And he can force his way there. Watson has a no-trade clause. You remember a few years ago when the Marlins traded Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees? Before that, they had deals lined up with the Cardinals and the Giants. They brought that idea to Stanton, and he said, no, I don't want to be a Cardinal. I don't want to be a Giant. I want to be a Yankee. Because Stanton had that no-trade clause, the Marlins had no choice but to trade him to the Yankees. It's the same thing here. In Deshaun Watson's mind, maybe there's a small gap between the Jets and Dolphins, and he'd be open to a trade to either team. But if he really has his heart set on being a Jet, if it's the Jets, ... and then the Dolphins, Deshaun Watson can force his way to the Jets very easily. And the Jets can offer a trade that, regardless of Watson's preference, could beat out all other teams. The Texans desperately need draft capital. They don't have a pick until the 3rd round this year. The Jets have 4 picks before the Texans have 1 this year. And they have 2 firsts in 2022. The stars are aligning perfectly for Deshaun Watson to be a New York Jet. Something that could have happened 4 years ago. But it didn't, because the Jets had Christian Hackenberg. Joe Douglas can undo that dreadful mistake by Mike McCagnon very easily. I'm not sure exactly what the package would be. I can't speculate on it. The closest comp that we have to this in recent NFL history is the Jay Cutler trade. But even then, that was in 2009. Cutler was traded along with a 5th round pick for 2 firsts and a 3rd. But even then, that's not a great comparison, because Deshaun Watson now is 1,000,000 times better than Jay Cutler ever was. You're going to have people bring up the Jared Goff trade, the Carson Wentz trade, the Sam Darnold trade. It's different. Those guys were unproven commodities at the time of those trades. Deshaun Watson has made 3 straight Pro Bowls. The reality is, I can't speculate on exactly what the Jets would need to give up to get Watson. But I'll say this. Whatever it is, it's worth it. You know how I feel about Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is a dreadful quarterback. I don't think he'll ever succeed in the NFL. I think he's going to go down in history as one of the biggest busts in NFL history. And I don't understand what people see in him. It's not enough to say that the Jets surrounded him with a dreadful supporting cast. You're right that they did. I'm not saying they didn't. But what did you see from Sam Darnold last year that makes you think he can still turn his career around? This guy's going to be 24 years old at the start of next season. He is coming off his worst ever season. Career lows in every category. There's no question in my mind that the Jets need a franchise quarterback. See, here's the trap that people fall into. They watch Jets games and they see Darnold make some really good throws, make some really exciting plays, and they see some glimmers of talent. They point to that and say, that's why this guy was the 3rd overall pick. And Robert Saleh basically echoed that. Look, if you loved Sam Darnold coming out of USC, you're going to believe that this guy can be saved. If you didn't, you're going to call this kid a bust. I think Sam Darnold is a bust. I never liked him coming out of USC. Go back and listen to that Beyond the Game. Never, ever did I like him. Never, ever did I say definitively that Sam Darnold is going to be the Jets' long-term answer at quarterback. And if you watch the games in totality and you look at the numbers, I think it cuts in my favor. But back to the fallacy. They say that the Jets have all these prime assets, gobs and gobs of cap space, really high draft picks, 6 picks in the first 100. You don't need Watson. Build around Darnold. You don't need Watson. You have bigger holes. And Mel Kiper poured fuel on that fire by saying in his mock draft that the Jets should take Devontae Smith with the 2nd overall pick. But here's the thing. The Jets trading for Watson doesn't preclude them from filling their other holes. There's no question that the Jets have a ton of holes. A real A1 running back, a real A1 wide receiver. They could stand to get better on the right side of the offensive line. They need to add a right end. They've got to add an outside linebacker. And they need 2 corners. The Jets have a ton of holes. But a Watson trade doesn't mean that the Jets are going to sit on their hands and do nothing for the rest of the offseason. In fact, It would be the ultimate disservice to Deshaun Watson if you did that. You're making this trade for a franchise quarterback. You're showing that you're actually going to go for this thing. To put him with a bunch of schmageggies here puts him in no better of a position than he'd be in Houston. Deshaun Watson alone doesn't make this team a playoff team. They need more. And they have the ability to add more. Let's do some football math. Let's use over the cap's salary cap calculator for the New York Jets. If they trade Darnold, cut Anderson, cut Fant, cut Griffin, cut Jackson, cut McDermott, cut Phillips, and cut Wesco, they're at just under $85 million of cap room. Deshaun Watson's cap hit next year is just under $16 million. That will leave the Jets with about $69 million of cap room. They can fill their other holes with $69 million. They can still sign Allen Robinson. They can still sign Taylor Moton. They can still sign Carl Lawson. They can still sign Shaq Barrett. They can still sign Ronald Darby. And I promise you that they'll still have picks to flesh out the roster even more. If the Jets miss out on Moton and Darrell Williams, they'll still have at least one high draft pick that they can use on a right tackle. The Jets actually can have their cake and eat it too. Joe Douglas really didn't try hard to put a great team out there last year. You saw the results. 0-13, nearly going winless, finishing 2-14, fans going nuts that they're not going to get Trevor Lawrence. You know what? It couldn't have worked out any better. Because Douglas punted last offseason, the Jets have a ton of flexibility this offseason that's going to enable them to add Deshaun Watson and fill their other holes. And they avoided the ignominy of going winless. It really couldn't have worked out any better for the Jets. I truly think that the stars are aligning for the Jets to get Watson. Mercury is in retrograde. Venus is in the house of Jupiter. Pluto's not a planet. It's all coming together for the Jets. I don't see the Dolphins making a run at Deshaun Watson. I think they'd be absolutely crazy to trade Tua. I really think he's the answer for him. I like Tua. He had a bad rookie season. A lot of quarterbacks have bad rookie seasons. Deshaun Watson only started 6 games his rookie season. He got the starting job and then got hurt. Josh Allen had a bad rookie season. To give up on Tua after you tanked for him would be ridiculous. No, save your assets if you're the Dolphins. The Jets don't have that luxury. They don't have a quarterback with potential like Tua. Sam Darnold doesn't have potential. Wherever Sam Darnold goes, he's gonna fail. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm gonna give myself some breathing room here, that come April 1st, Deshaun Watson will be a New York Jet. And I will be absolutely over the moon. I don't care what they give up. It needs to happen. There are some other quarterbacks that could be traded. According to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, there's going to be an open competition in Rams camp for the starting quarterback job between Jared Goff and John Wolford. And that's only if Goff isn't traded first. On Monday, I spoke about Matthew Stafford being the Jets' backup plan if they don't get Deshaun Watson. And I don't think they're going to have to cross that bridge. Like I said, I really think they're going to get Watson. But if they don't, I said they should go after Matthew Stafford. Because I really don't think they're going to be able to trade up one spot. I just don't see that happening. Do I still think it's possible? Yeah, there's a small chance of it, I think, but I certainly wouldn't bet the rent on it like I would on the Jets getting Watson. But again, if I'm wrong about Watson, I said they could go after Stafford. I'm changing that. My order of preference now is Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, Justin Fields, and Zach Wilson. Goff is only 26 years old. Yes, he's on a huge contract. On September 3rd, 2019, he signed a 4-year extension with the Rams for $134 million. That's a lot of money. And Goff has certainly fallen short of fulfilling the expectations that come with that contract. The Rams haven't made it anywhere near the Super Bowl after that contract was signed. Goff didn't take the jump into superstardom that we all thought he could. He's still a top 15 quarterback, but you don't want top 15 for over $30 million a year. You want elite. So I understand why the Rams would want to trade him, but it still doesn't make sense to me. He still has talent. This guy set a career high in completion percentage last year with 67%. He would have thrown for over 4,000 yards if he played the last game of the season against the Cardinals. The touchdowns went down, there's no question. But Goff did play well in the playoffs. Had a really gutsy win against the Seahawks with a broken thumb. It wasn't his fault that the Packers scored 32 points against them in the divisional round. I'm a big Jared Goff fan. I really am. Is he being helped by Sean McVay? There's no question. If Sean McVay is no longer Jared Goff's coach, Jared Goff will take a step back. But he'll still be good. He does have talent. Does he have moments where he infuriates you? The answer is yes. But I think he has more moments where you say to yourself, man alive, this guy is really, really good. I wouldn't call him great. He's like one step above game manager, but one step below great. He's in that Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Teddy Bridgewater tier. You can throw Ryan Tannehill in there also. I'd take Goff in a minute if I missed out on Watson, if I was Joe Douglas. I think the Rams would be insane to move on from him. There's no way on this earth that you can go into the season with John Wolford as your starting quarterback if you're Sean McVay. He'd fall into a trap that a lot of coaches fall into. My system is so great that I can make anyone look good. You know, we saw something similar with Adam Gase. Needless to say, it didn't work out. I think McVay is too smart to go into the season with Wolford as his starter. But I'll say this. Goff is due a lot of money. His cap hit this year is just under $35 million. The Rams are in cap hell right now. I don't hate the idea of moving on from Goff and then drafting a guy like Trey Lance, Kyle Trask, or Mac Jones. Let Wolford start for a little bit, then roll with the rookie. With the assets that the Rams will get back in a Goff trade, they'd be in position to move up for a guy like Lance, Trask, or Jones. I wouldn't mind that, but rolling with John Wolford and benching Goff, or getting rid of Goff and adding a subpar backup quarterback and then roll with Wolford, that's not going to work. But again, I do think McVay is too smart to fall into that trap. There is one more quarterback story to talk about. According to Jason LaCanfora of CBS Sports, coaches and executives around the NFL are convinced that Aaron Rodgers may leave the Packers. It goes without saying that the Packers would be absolutely insane to trade Aaron Rodgers. I don't care what the haul is. I don't care that you have Jordan Love. I don't care that you have Matt LaFleur, who, excluding NFC Conference Championship games has shown that he is a great head coach. That's just fact. You cannot, under any circumstances, trade Aaron Rodgers. It really feels pointless to bring it up, to tell you the truth. The riots that you'd see in Green Bay afterwards would be insane. This isn't a Brett Favre situation where the guy retires and then says he wants to come back. No, Rodgers has shown no indication that he's ready to move on from football. So you'd be trading the pending league MVP to make room for this quarterback in Jordan Love, who I thought was massively overrated. He'd be so far behind the 8 ball, he would need to be as mentally tough as anyone to make that work. The reality is, I truly believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to be back under center for the Packers next year. I don't know what Jordan Love's future is in Green Bay. It was a stupid pick when they made it. It's still a stupid pick. No, I can't fathom a scenario where the Packers trade Aaron Rodgers. The only way I could see it would be if Rodgers makes a trade request. Is it possible that he could do that? The answer is yes. Especially if he really doesn't like Matt LaFleur. It seemed like that relationship is stabilized. Now, we don't know. I mean, the Packers have done a terrible job of supporting Rodgers. There's no question about that. I've talked about that before. They've disrespected him a lot. But Rodgers just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would make a trade request. I don't think we're in a Watson or Stafford situation here. I think Aaron Rodgers is destined to be a lifetime Green Bay Packer. Alright, now I'll give you some New York Mets Valk talk. They made 3 big moves yesterday. They signed Aaron Loop. We don't know the contract yet, but we know it's for 1 year. They traded Steven Matz to the Blue Jays for Sean Reed-Foley, Yennsy Diaz, and Josh Winkowski. And they named Zach Scott interim general manager. I'll start with Loop. He makes perfect sense for the Mets. With Justin Wilson being a free agent, they really needed to add another lefty to that bullpen. Loop is a very talented lefty. Last year for the Rays, he went 3-2 with a 2.52 ERA. Before that, he hit a rough patch. Loop is another Tampa Bay Rays pitching success story. Started out with 3 good years with the Blue Jays, then hit a rough patch, went to the Rays, and had a really good season. Didn't pitch well in the World Series, but in the wild card round and the ALCS, Loop was good. I mean, Loop has talent. He's a good pitcher. He makes sense for the Mets. It's nice to see the Mets focusing on their bullpen. It's been an issue for them for years. Bringing in May and Loop should go a long way towards fortifying that. Obviously, they missed out on Brad Hand, That left a bad taste in Mets fans' mouths. There's no question that Hand is better than Loop. But Loop is still a good pitcher. He makes sense for the Mets. It's a good move to bring him in. As for getting rid of Matz, it's a move that just had to be made. Matz has talent. You've seen it if you're a Mets fan. This guy's had some really good seasons. He's just never been able to put it all together. Last year he was so bad. He went 0-5 with a 9.68 ERA that he finished the year in the bullpen. Matt should have worked for the Mets. You wanted him to work for the Mets. Local kid. Born in Stony Brook. Went to high school in East Setauket. Lefty starter. You wanted him to work so badly for the Mets. He just didn't. It's unfortunate. But the Mets did a great job to get rid of him for a package of talented pitchers. Sean Reed-Foley hasn't had much of a chance in the majors to strut his stuff, but in the cups of coffee that he's had, he's shown talent. Last year he went 1-0 with a 1.35 ERA. The year before that he went 2-4 with a 4.26 ERA. He'll be a pseudo long reliever for the Mets. Reed-Foley has talent. I've seen him a lot. I've seen him go up against the Yankees before. He has talent. There's no question about that. Yennsy Diaz pitched in one game for the Blue Jays last year. Didn't do anything. But let me tell you, this kid has talent. He has a really good fastball. Good changeup. He's working on a breaking ball. It's really not where you'd like it to be in a perfect world, and he really doesn't have a true strikeout pitch. He tends to pitch to contact a lot. His future may be in the bullpen, but Diaz does have potential. That fastball of his would play up really well in the bullpen. And Josh Winkowski has a ton of potential. The ideal pitcher's frame, 6'4", just a shade over 200 pounds. Really good sinking fastball. Gets hitters to strike out on his slider. Not the greatest changeup in the world, but he's 22 years old. There's still time for him to work on that. The Mets really wanted to upgrade their starting pitching depth this offseason. They've done that. Think about this rotation for a minute. DeGrom, Carrasco, Stroman, Peterson, Lucchesi, Reed-Foley, Diaz, and Syndergaard waiting in the wings. You have really good pitching depth if you're the Mets. They easily win this trade. Even though I'd like to see Matt succeed since he's a local kid, I wouldn't bet the rent on him succeeding for the Blue Jays. they're going to expect him to fill a big role in their rotation, a rotation that really needed help. I've talked about it before. I don't think he's capable of doing it. And Zach Scott being the interim GM makes perfect sense. He was the runner-up to Jared Porter in the initial GM search. Truthfully, I didn't even know that the Mets had hired him away from the Red Sox. That's a good job by them to bring in a guy that they were really high on. And now he gets to be interim GM. If he proves that he's as smart as the Mets think he is, he could very easily get the full-time job. But I'll say this, though. For as long as Sandy Alderson is affiliated with the Mets, he's going to have final say. And even though I was skeptical of that when it first happened, he's done a good job this offseason. I do like that there seems to be a succession plan in place for Scott to take over the Mets front office when Alderson steps aside. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that I'm gonna write a book, How to Make a Small Fortune in Baseball. But it's only gonna be one page. And that page is just gonna say, you start with a large fortune.